Right, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to our next STC webinar. Today we have Nigel Corbett with us from CED talking about how we can maximize our cash flow. Obviously, we all know that cash is king within business. So in these times, you want to make sure that you set yourself up as well as you possibly can. So I'm sure that Nigel will share some valuable knowledge with us, which is great. So as you guys know, we're doing these as a series. So every Thursday at 11 o'clock is the aim for us to do various webinars. So we've got details on the website on the next ones coming up. So we'll have one on business continuity planning coming up. We also have one on cybersecurity in the supply chain coming up. And there's various others coming in where we're looking at things like business strategy as well, and marketing and other useful information. There's one on business resilience to build that up within your business as well coming up. So there's a lot of interesting webinars that we're organizing that are in the pipeline. So do please have a look at the website and obviously join for those that you wish to attend. So with that, I mean, the format of today is that, we'll hand over to Nigel very shortly, who'll run us through his presentation. We'll, if you're all okay to keep your questions till the end, then kind of like use the chat function to raise your hand or give me a physical wave on the screen if you want to ask any questions. But then that's kind of how we'll want to do it. And then right at the end, I'd quite like to run a little poll just to get your feedback on how you think this session was and stuff. So if you could all have a go at filling in, that would be great. So that's about it from an admin point of view. So with that, I'll now hand over to Nigel to take us away. Nigel, over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So I'll just share my screen. With the times we're going through at the moment, there's obviously a lot of things the government are doing for us now to help get through this situation, such as the business continuity loans, the business bounce back loans, the job retention or furlough scheme, and the assistance for the self-employed. However, I'm going to touch upon a few other things that have existed for some time, which can again help maximize cash flow. Research and development being one of them, and I'll briefly touch on a couple of other points, being patent box and capital allowances for commercial premises. Now, research and development is something that we can look at now. We can see if you've been doing R&D in your recent trading past, and that's something that can have a cash impact now. Patent box and capital allowances claims are more things to look at for the future. So I'll move on with research and development for now, and we'll get to patent box and capital allowances at the end. So yeah, some discussion points. What is R&D? Some examples of R&D. I'm hopefully going to highlight some things that you might not think would qualify for R&D, but can. What the cash impact is for SMEs. Now, when we use the term SMEs in terms of research and development, that's actually quite different from the SME definition in the Companies Act, because this is EU-driven limits. So it's actually less than 500 employees and less than 100 million in turnover. If you're above that, there is another scheme to cover that, but I won't be covering that today. That would be something to talk about separately. I'll then go through the claim process and what you actually have to do. And then, like I said, I'll touch on patent box and capital allowances claims. So, yeah, HMRC's guidance, as always, is very, very clear. The R&D, to get R&D relief, you need to explain how a project looked for an advance in science or technology, had to overcome uncertainty, tried to overcome this uncertainty. Now, that uncertainty rears its head over and over again in the HMRC guidance: technological or scientific uncertainty, and could not be easily worked out by a professional in the field. Now, that is very grey in its definition, in my opinion. So what does it actually mean? So, have you developed a new, improved, or innovative product, service, or process? Now, with products, this could be something as simple as creating a product that you already have with a different material. Something that maybe has to be heat resistant or conduct heat in a different way to how you're making the product now. Something like that, anything where you have to involve an element of testing, trial and error, that all could potentially qualify for R&D. Services is a bit more difficult because we're not talking about a person coming to do a service for you. This is more software driven. So if you are producing a software that fulfills a service, then that could potentially qualify. And processes, if you make a widget and you work out how to make that widget 5% more efficient or with 5% less waste, anything like that where you're thinking, how can we make this better? That could potentially qualify for R&D. And the thing, a competent professional could not easily work out. What they actually mean by that is, could somebody in your industry, if presented with the same question, come up with the same answer that you have straight away? Or would they have to go out and do exactly the same trial and error process to come to a conclusion? A few things to consider. Is there an off-the-shelf solution? Is this something that you can just go out and buy? Is this common knowledge in your industry? Are all of your competitors already doing this? And are you a bit late to the party? Is there an identical product already out there? Sometimes, even if there is already an identical product out there, you may qualify for R&D because you can make your product slightly different or slightly more efficient or have slightly better functions to make it qualify. So if there is no off-the-shelf solution, if it's not common knowledge, and if there's not an identical product, then there's potentially an R&D claim available to you. So some examples. I won't touch on all of these. I'll just touch on some of the ones that I think are interesting. So a brewery, for example, there are several things within a brewery that could qualify for R&D. If you make your own fermenters, for example, the process of developing and building that fermenting equipment, it kind of ties in with food production as well, where if you need to heat or cool ingredients to certain levels, how do you do that? Well, there's not really an off-the-shelf solution for heating every kind of food or cooling every kind of food to particular levels to make it perfect for the processing. So that could qualify. A farm is another one, and I find this interesting. Something as simple as, if you shear sheep, how do you hold the sheep still while you're shearing it? Well, if you come up with some novel way of holding the sheep in place, that could qualify. So this is it's not a case of, it's just, scientists in lab coats that qualify for R&D. It's very wide ranging. Another one I like to touch on is accountants. What R&D do accountants do? Well, if we have software that we want to perform a particular function, so I'll give you an example of us actually. We have our accountancy software, which has one unified database of all of our clients' information. Now, we wanted to extract some of that information to be able to produce mass emails. So we wrote a bit of software that went into that database and pulled out specific bits of information to fulfill a service, i.e. populate an email with a number of email addresses, an informal salutation, etc. That is potentially an R&D project. And manufacturing, almost everyone in manufacturing, in my opinion, is probably doing some form of R&D, even if they don't particularly think they're doing any form of R&D. If you buy a machine and you have to change that machine in any way to make it fit the work you do, there's potentially an R&D claim there, unless the machine you buy does exactly what you want out of the box. It's something to consider. So yeah, the cash impact of R&D. So qualifying expenditure, what this is, it's if you spend time or money on any of those things that we've just discussed, then you can claim that as an enhanced expenditure. So staff wages, have you spent time customizing one of your machines to do a particular purpose? Have you spent time, staff time, developing a piece of software? If so, you can claim a percentage of the staff's wages, employers' national insurance, pension contributions. You total up what it costs you to employ that member of staff for a year and apply an appropriate percentage to their costs. Material and consumable costs for the R&D work that you're doing. Software costs, if you have to get a specific piece of software to measure components or fulfill a particular role within the R&D process, we can claim that. Subcontractor costs are slightly different. So if you were to outsource some software development, you could still potentially have an R&D claim, but the amount would be restricted to 65% of what you were paying the subcontractor for the R&D work. An element of light and heat, and your accountancy fees associated with producing the R&D claim and submitting it. So you actually get an enhanced expenditure of 130%, meaning that you get 230% relief on that expenditure. And losses generated by R&D can be exchanged for cash from HMRC at a rate of 14.5%. So I've done a little example on a quite modest £10,000 of expenditure. So in a profit-making company, £10,000 of qualifying expenditure, you would normally get relief at 19%. Now, the enhanced relief is on top of that. So you get 10,000 at 130% at 19% relief. So an additional relief of 2,470, which means you're actually getting 43.7% tax relief on every pound of R&D expenditure. Now, if you're a loss-making company or a company that is just starting out and developing, you maybe got some cash in and you're developing your product to get it to market, you're probably going to be loss-making in the first couple of years. Well, you can actually take the £10,000 of qualifying expenditure, gross it up by the 130%, and providing you've got losses of at least that amount, you can cash the whole lot in at 14.5%. So that is worth 33% to you in pure cash terms. If you did have some profit and a loss is generated by the R&D, the amount of that loss can be cashed in. Now, the claim process, if you believe you've done any R&D effectively within the last 2 years, you can potentially make a claim for those years. So this statutory submission deadline for CT 600s is 1 year after the year end for that CT 600. You've then got a 1 year resubmission window. So what that means is, the example I've given here, a May year end. So up until a week today, we could actually go back to expenditure from 1st of June 2017 to date and make an R&D claim. So you can imagine that can soon add up to be quite a significant sum if you've been developing over that time. The process itself is fairly straightforward. You either do your CT 600 with the R&D included, or you do an amended CT 600 for the previous years and tax computation. An analysis of the expenditure, so all of those different items I highlighted here, you would do a breakdown of your expenditure by those categories, and then a written narrative of the R&D work undertaken. Now, this is the bit that takes the time, because you have to justify what your uncertainties were. You've got to basically give a business case for why you're doing the R&D work. Give some details of the outcome, or why it's ongoing, or what additional work you intend to do in future years. And then a list of the documentation or evidence that you would have to support that claim if HMRC were to look into it. So that pretty much rounds up the R&D side of things. There's a lot of grey areas within the R&D legislation, but I'm more than happy to talk to anybody if they'd like to discuss. I'll briefly touch on patent box as well now. So patent box is effectively a reduced corporation tax rate for any profit generated by way of a patent. So whether that's you selling a patented product, you selling a product that's been produced with a patented process, or licensing income from a patented product or process where you sell the patent. So you effectively get a 10% tax rate on those profits. Now, this can get quite complex in its calculations because you have to do something called income streaming, where you work out exactly how much profit is relating to the patent. However, if you believe you have got something that's innovative in your production process, or you've got an innovative product, it may be worth just asking a patent lawyer if you could potentially get a patent for that product or process. It can be quite lucrative if you have a patented process and you use that process in everything you produce. That can be quite a significant impact. Capital allowance claims. This is a bit more complex. So firstly, you need to own a commercial premises. And there are certain timelines on when you've bought that premises, etc., what the previous owner has done. So it needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. You may be able to claim relief on this hidden expenditure. So when you buy the building, you normally pay a price, which includes such things as air conditioning, wiring, heating, lighting. And if capital allowance claims haven't been made on those items of expenditure in the past, you can potentially get a claim for them now. But again, that would need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, because HMRC have recently tightened up the sort of rules on this. So there's a lot more hoops to jump through, but it can be very worthwhile if you'd like to have a chat about it. So that pretty much brings me to the end of my presentation. If you have got any specific questions, by all means you can ask them now. If you'd prefer not to ask them now, my email and phone number is there. Please give me a call, drop me an email. and we can talk it through. So yeah, if you have any questions, please ask them now.
Thank you, Nigel. That's great. I'll stop the sharing now.
There used to be.
Yes, by all means, Neil. But there used to be a function where I could unmute you all in one go, but it doesn't seem to happen. So, Neil, if you want to start with the question, I'll try to unmute everybody in the meantime if they want to.
Beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah, Nigel, you mentioned accountancy services as part of the R&D tax claim. How does that work again?
So if your accountant charges you a fee for assisting with producing the R&D claim document, submitting the CT 600, you can claim that cost as part of your enhanced expenditure and gross it up by the 130% and claim the full tax relief on that. But not only that, your bookkeeping time as well. If you have a bookkeeper that you pay to do the bookkeeping, an element of their time to record the R&D information, that counts as well. Okay,
and that could be, if they're not charging you a specific fee to do R&D, that you could just say, you know, it's 15% of the annual fee we could allocate to that.
Yeah, as long as you've got a reasonable justification behind it. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
There's actually been a question on the chat from Peter, and so if you want to ask a question by the chat, by all means do that, or just kind of like raise your hand or whatever. But the question is there a minimum claim amount?
No, there is no minimum claim amount at all. There used to be many years ago, but the government scrapped that to open it up to a lot more smaller businesses. However, there's a commercial justification. You know, if you've got £100 of R&D expenditure, is it worth the time and effort to go through and fill out all of the process, you know, calculate all of your costs, etc. I think, you know, if you've got, you know, more than a 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000, then it's probably going to be beneficial to make the claim. Certainly, if you're above 10,000 of R&D expenditure, then it's definitely worthwhile, you know, putting in the effort.
Yeah, that makes sense. What you were saying in terms of like the processes and you know what qualifies it or not, it actually seems sort of fairly vague or open to interpretation. So as a company, how would you know? I mean, are there people out there that can advise you on that sort of stuff, or because you don't want to put in a claim that is frivolous and that's not going to work, right? So, I mean, do people really know, or are there other people they can get to get advice on that?
Yeah. So speak to somebody who deals with R&D claims, such as myself. There are a number of others out there. There is also, if you're unsure, the HMRC Advanced Assurance Service, where you can effectively produce a sort of condensed version of your full R&D claim document. You explain what you're doing, why you're doing it. You write to HMRC and they'll write back and say, yes, we think this qualifies as R&D, or no, we don't think this qualifies as R&D. So that service is really useful. But I would say in the first instance, it's best to speak to someone such as myself and just have a chat. That's the best way to get to know whether there's potentially R&D there.
Excellent. Yes, Anne.
Hi. So from my simple, I'm in a startup setup at the moment. So I've always worked for a large organisation where all this sort of stuff always takes place. I've been involved in it from a software development point of view, which, as you've quite rightly said, is always very subjective as to whether or not you're actually providing something that's been done before. But in the setup that we've got at the moment, whereby we are starting off at ground zero, we have nothing else, and for the first, say, 3 months, all of our time, effort, materials will purely be on that proof of concept of putting things together and then selling it after that point. Is my interpretation correct in that all of that effort for that 3 months or 6 month timeline is likely then to be claimable?
Potentially, yes. It depends what you're doing exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm more than happy to have a conversation afterwards to go through some specifics. But if you are doing all of this work to get to a point where you're doing something, you're selling something new, selling something innovative, then yes, all of that build-up work. It doesn't matter if you have no income so far. The R&D scheme is there to help those businesses get to that point where they've got something to add to the economy.
Yeah. Okay. And that would be in addition to any other funding or grants that you might also be considering?
If you are receiving government grants in addition, then the R&D won't apply on the part of the project that's being grant funded.
Okay, so at the moment the answer to that is no, but that's one of the other things that we would be looking at. So it's just understanding how the two might actually align or how they actually separate. But I suppose if we understand what elements and put things down at a project level, which is the R&D projects, then we can actually see quite easily when it comes to making a claim, what's that element and what's something else.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just have another question on where you were talking about sort of machinery and all that sort of stuff. So, because you said that if you need to do anything to the machine to make a particular part. So, if I was an advanced engineering business and I needed to make a certain part, and to do that, I needed to develop some tooling, would that tooling potentially qualify as well? Because that could be huge for a lot of companies.
Potentially, if it was a case of you go to the guys who make the tooling for that machine and say, I want a tool that does this, and they go to their shelf, they pick one off and go there.
Yeah.
Then no. If it's a case of any uncertainty, I've had exactly this thing with an engineering business, and they were machining a particularly tough material. So they had to come up with some particularly tough tooling. And so there was many tests on the tooling, different materials to make the tooling with. That does qualify. So again, that goes back to is there an off-the-shelf solution? Is this something that a competent professional in your industry would know straight away? Well, if the guy can go to the shelf and pick the tool up and go, there it is, then yes. If it's a case of, actually, no, we need to test this, we need to test this, we need to, even have a look up online and see what materials we could use, then that would potentially qualify.
And so then all the production engineering and all that sort of stuff would all be part of that.
Yeah.
And would it actually need to be successful to qualify for a claim? So
no.
Right.
No, so it can be an abortive project. So if you come up with an idea and there's an uncertainty with it, and actually it proves the uncertainty. If you can't do it, it's proved the point that there was an uncertainty in the first place.
So it's almost like, we were trying to develop this for 6 months and it turned out it didn't work, but that 6 months could potentially still qualify.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, that's quite good. Thanks. So does anybody have any other questions? I mean, because I have a couple, but I don't want to dominate proceedings if anybody else has anything.
Do you also handle the patent box?
We do as a firm, yes. Again, it's the first part of the process is actually getting the patent, which we don't do.
Just say yes. Just say yes.
Well, you need to get the patent with a solicitor first, but we deal with the claim as a firm. Yeah.
Kim's been asking.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, obviously, it seems from the presentation that obviously the R&D tax credits is a good route to get stuff done now. So, I mean, how soon after submitting a claim would you get the money in? I mean, does it go like quarterly or something, or
no? In normal circumstances, when HMRC aren't stretched quite as thin, the expectation is that we would have the refund within 6 weeks.
All right, okay.
It's sometimes a lot quicker than that. With first year R&D claims, so if this is the first claim you've ever done, it would probably take a little longer because the return is received by HMRC's computer, it sees something different, it forwards it to a real physical person to actually have a look at. And if you follow the steps that I've laid out in my presentation in terms of providing that report, providing all of that detail, the real person who gets that land on their desk, they see a computation backed up by quite a substantial document, that they're going to look on that a lot more favorably than if you just put the figure in the box and click the submit button. So my suggestion would be always make sure you do that claim document to go along with your claim.
You can put in the claim at any time.
Yeah, within those time frames that I included.
Yeah, but you don't have to wait until like a year end and there's no like bidding rounds or any of that sort of stuff.
It goes in with the CT 600. So as long as you've got an open CT 600, you can make a submission.
Right. Excellent.
Nigel, what if your income is from defined contracts where the work done on those contracts isn't exactly R&D, so I couldn't necessarily claim, but with a lot of speculative work outside of that, and obviously speculative work costs living costs and opportunity costs, and that is the R&D work being applied. How do you assign a value to that, and can you?
Yes, you can. You would need to keep some records about the time and money you're spending on those prospective projects. But yeah, there's potentially a claim there. How you put a value on that is the difficult bit, but that's something that we could certainly do.
You mentioned keeping records. What kind of evidence is needed? Because of course you could just say, I spent all my time and I haven't had a Sunday in a year and I've done loads of R&D, sir. It's
HMRC may investigate, and as long as you have got enough information to substantiate a particular figure you're claiming. So if it was your time, for example, and you said, I'm spending 20% of my working week on this project or these projects, if HMRC then investigated you, they might look at what you personally are billing. Are you billing 5 days worth of your time to these other things that aren't qualifying projects? Have you got any sort of time recording? They might look at other things such as project related emails. What time are you sending these project related emails? Because if you're sending them at sort of 9-10 o'clock at night, well, that's outside your normal working day. They can see actually, yes, hours are being put in outside of the normal working time. I think it's just a case of, as long as you're being sort of just and reasonable with what you want to claim, that's probably the best way to go. HMRC aren't likely to look at you unfavorably if you are trying to be reasonable and fair.
Yeah. Okay. I still find it a bit great because you mentioned there where and billing time. As I say, the income is not from R&D whatsoever. The R&D support is being supported by other income. So I couldn't say, I couldn't claim back on money earned from the R&D as of yet. But maybe that's not the point. It's only for costs, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what you could do if you wanted to, sort of shore up your claim is actually keep a timesheet. That's something I do day in, day out. If it wouldn't need to be as detailed as mine necessarily, but you could have, this is the amount of time I spent on the billable stuff. This is the amount of time I spent on prospective R&D stuff for each day.
Okay. And I guess you could just backdate that, and you could estimate what you've done if you haven't been doing that so far.
Yeah. As long as you come up with a reasonable justification for the amount of hours you've claimed, then yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Just in terms of, because obviously we've been talking a lot about sort of R&D tax credits, and that seems to be a sort of a very efficient and quick way. In terms of the government schemes that you mentioned right at the start, like C-bills and all that sort of stuff, I mean, can you touch upon that very quickly in terms of, you know, do you have any information on what works particularly well, what's actually quite quick and quite good, anything like that?
Yes.
Might be an unfair question, but.
Yeah, at the moment, the bounce back loans seem to be going through very quickly because of the reduced information requirement, the reduced underwriting requirement. They are going through very quickly. The business continuity or CBILS loans are a little bit more arduous in terms of what you need to do to get to the point where the bank pays the funds out. From the conversations I've had with various bank managers, it seems to be that you need a 2-year forecast showing 6 months worth of affected trading, and the ability to repay the loan will be based on pre-crisis levels of income. That's what I've been told by the bank managers that I've spoken to. So you need to factor that in when working out how much you're looking to borrow if you to go down the CBILS route. The furlough scheme is paying out very quickly. Once you've made your furlough submission, the government guaranteed to pay it out. Well, they said they'd pay it out within 6 days, and actually we've been finding it is 5 or 6 days from submission date, which is very good. The self-employment side of things, I have had a few clients ring me up and say that their funds have come through from that, but that is one thing that the government have said the accountants aren't allowed to submit on behalf of their clients. So we can assist the clients with the information they need, but we can't actually do the submission. So we're not able to track how long that's actually taking to be paid.
And then there's also things like sort of VAT deferrals and business rates and stuff.
Yeah, so VAT deferrals, any VAT that's due in April, May or June can be deferred. If you pay your VAT by direct debit, I would suggest cancelling the direct debit. And you then have until March next year to pay that VAT. So it's a cash flow assistance rather than anything else. And they have said they will not charge interest and penalties on those payments. So that is just basically an interest-free loan for 12 months. If you want to defer corporation tax, HMRC are looking favourably at payment plans on other taxes at the moment as well. Before they would, if you phoned the payment support line, they would ask, have you maxed out all of your personal credit cards to pay your corporation tax liability? Have you done this? Have you borrowed as much as you possibly can? Before they would agree to a payment plan. Now it's a lot more favourable due to the current situation.
Excellent, very, very good. Is there anything from anybody? I'm always keen that people walk away with sort of all their questions answered while they have the opportunity. Anything from anybody else? Are we all very happy? Right, I mean, in any case, I mean, all of you will receive an email hopefully later today with a recording of this webinar anyway. We'll also share Nigel's slides and we'll share Nigel's contact details as well. So if you want to follow up with Nigel afterwards, then you know, you can please do that. If I may take a moment of your time. So first of all, thank you, Nigel. I think that's been very informative and very helpful. I'd quite like to run a quick poll now, if I may, just to get your views on how you thought this webinar went, and also what you would like to see in the future. Because we're looking to build these up even, you know, should there be such a thing as returning to normal, then we would still like to run these and add value in that sort of way. So please do tell us what else you would like to see. So if all is well, you will now have a little box on your screen with a bunch of questions. It takes about 40 seconds to fill in, so it's hardly a big deal. But kind of just click, you know, on your feelings and stuff. You know, Nigel, you don't have to as the presenter if you don't want to.
Definitely
yeah,
excellent.
Sorry?
Definitely
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But if you could all take a moment to fill that in, that would be really great. So thank you very much for doing that. Yeah, and then really, you know, as soon as that's been completed, then I wish everybody a wonderful day and a good time, and hopefully we'll see you next week. But you know, once again, thank you to Nigel. I think it's been very informative. I can see some of the votes coming in now, which is excellent. But yeah, that's what it is. Thank you very much.